Pleased to be joined now by Tim Krueger, TK Brackets on Twitter and Bluejay Banter, Creighton's rivals site. Tim, good to see you. I've never actually talked Creighton, Iowa basketball with you. We're always talking brackets, bracketology in late February, early March. But it's good to see you, sir, and appreciate you taking the time. Big game over in Omaha tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a big game just because it'll be so much fun, like to get a fair amount of opponents' fans in the arena. The only time we do that is when we play Nebraska every year. But this will be great. There's so many Iowa fans here in the Omaha, Council Bluffs area that it should be a great atmosphere, and it should be a fantastic, fun game to watch because traditionally both teams get up and down and score a lot of points.
Last time these two teams played, I mentioned this to you before we started recording, was in Wells Fargo Arena. I don't even have the year in front of me, but I was at that game, and it was ugly, ugly, ugly. I believe that was a Doug McBucket's game. And so I, of course, live in Doug's hometown, not actually far from where he grew up. So the irony of this matchup is real, but it's not really that long of a drive for anybody from Iowa. So I'll be anxious to see. Obviously, a lot of hype around this Creighton team. This is their first real big game of the year. They really have not been tested. Iowa hasn't been tested either. Tell us a little bit about what you've learned, Tim, through two games: North Dakota State, Texas A&M, not Texas A&M, Florida A&M, both wins early.
Yeah, as you said, they're bye games. They've had a long kind of back and forth with North Dakota State simply because Coach McDermott used to coach at North Dakota State, so he's got some relationship there. And this year, I think it's happened a couple of times. He's a former player of his as their coach, so he always does that. Like in the exhibition game, he always finds a school he coached at or a player he knows. At any rate, A&M, Creighton got out to a big start in the A&M game. They shot lights out. A&M's strategy was, hey, we're not going to worry about the ball screen. We're just not going to let Kalkbrenner get the ball on the ball screen to the lob. Well, as one player told me, pick your poison there, because then they left wide open threes and Creighton just buried them. And I think Creighton won by 50 points plus. To give you kind of maybe a somewhat of a measure there, 2 nights later they went to Nebraska and played without Tominga, as we mentioned. He's injured, so they're shorthanded, a very good player of theirs. And I think Nebraska beat them by 20, 25 points. So to get to kind of the level of where A&M is at. A&M actually, they got rid of all their players from last year. They were well at the bottom, got a new coach, and they actually have some dudes. I mean, they've got some pieces. They just couldn't shoot the three. They'll give you some kind of a game inside, but North Dakota State was typical North Dakota State team. I think they're down a little bit this year. They only have one senior, but a lot of their young guys were very impressive. But in that game, Creighton just did a tremendous job on Skunberg, their senior, their only senior and their best player. He'd scored 25 the night before, or 2 nights before, and Creighton held him to like 4 points. So tremendous job there. Creighton got off to a really slow start, had some sloppy turnovers. It was pretty much NDSU's coach used to play for McDermott, so he kind of knew what McDermott ran, and they kind of confused Creighton's guards a little bit with the way they were guarding that high ball screen, and it gave them a look like the lob was there, but it really wasn't. So that developed into a few turnovers, but then they came out the second half, went on a 25-2 run right off the get-go and just buried them. And that's what this team can do. They if you think Creighton's had shooters in the past, it's nothing like this year. They're absolutely loaded between Schreierman, Trey Alexander, who so far you look at him and you cannot imagine him not being first or second team All-American. They brought in Stephen Ashworth from Utah State, and if you watched any Mountain West last year, he was one of the top players in the league. He's like a 6'1" point guard who absolutely, I mean, it's not can he shoot? His shot very rarely hits the rim when it goes through. I mean, he's just lights out. And then, Mason Miller, the guy, Mike Miller, former NBA guy, his son is now a sophomore, and he's taken over the 4 spot. And he's a lights out shooter, especially from the corner. He just doesn't miss. So you got 4 lights out 3-point shooters, plus if you watch any of Creighton last year, you're going to see Baylor Schreiman's body. He's put on some muscle and really taken care of himself in the offseason. He's able to get to the hole a lot more effectively this year. He's tougher to guard. Trey Alexander's extended his he's deadly on that 10, 15-foot pull-up jumper. He's extended it out to the 3-point line where he's really hitting a high percentage of threes now. So, and then, of course, we haven't even mentioned Ryan Kalkbrenner, preseason, second, third team All-American. He went to the draft combine, and obviously one thing they want to do is see him extend his game. So he's got a beautiful shot and a great touch, and he's extending that. So he's throwing up threes as well. So you've got that, and then you've got a nice core of people coming off the bench that can fill little holes. Fran Farabello hasn't shot the ball very well since he's been at Creighton. He was a transfer from TCU last year, but he's a guy Mac trusts. He knows where to be on defense. He's sometimes overmatched on defense because he's only 6'3", but he knows where to be. He knows how to run the offense. He's just not going to make a mistake out there. They've got a young freshman you might see tomorrow night, Josiah Dotzler, and the name rings a bell. Josh's brother is one of the all-time steals and assists leader at Creighton. Josiah's bigger than Josh, can shoot the ball much better than Josh. He's looked fabulous as a freshman, so he might get some run. And, of course, the luxury Creighton has is Frederick King, the backup center, is 6'11", just a monster. I mean, he would start for, I got to believe, 2/3 of Division I teams in the country. He's a beast. So they can go 1-2 back and forth with those guys. So they've got a nice 1-2 punch in the middle that, they can always rest Kalkbrenner if he gets in foul trouble, what have you. So far, so good. They got up to a little slow start against NDSU. They blew A&M right out of the building. They won by 50, but slow start against NDSU. But then they went on like a 25-2 run to start the second half and just started drilling threes. And they can get on these runs, and that's why I think the game's going to be so fun, because obviously Iowa's always known for the fast pace up and down 3-point game too.
So how do you defend Creighton, Tim? Because you mentioned people like Farabello, and hasn't shot great since he got here. I don't know what his stats were last year, but he's one guy I looked up prior to this interview, and he's shooting 50% so far this year. I think he's made 3 threes through 2 games. Looks like they've got pick your poison, right, with shooters across the board. And Iowa, as you said, typically scores a lot of points. They like to get up and down, but they're very young, and they're obviously Fran's teams are never known for defending very well.
Yeah,
you know that. You know this from being a bracketologist.
Yeah, Creighton's had that tag too. However, the last couple of years, Creighton's been ranked in the top 20 in KenPom on defensive efficiency. So Mac's really done a great job of building that defense. Yeah, so far both teams, oddly enough, kind of had the same strategy. They just weren't going to let Creighton do the lob. You may have seen last year when Ryan Nembhard was point guard, that was their bread and butter. He'd take it in and just lob it into Kalkbrenner and stuff. Some of that's Ashworth being new at the point and not maybe the chemistry is not quite there yet. But some of that was more of that probably was certainly the way both teams defended. They weren't going to allow that lob. And again, that's pick your poison. If you're going to leave Ashworth, if you're not going to come over that screen, you're going to leave him wide open. He's going to drill that three. So yeah, I don't know what the answer is. I think if I was guarding Creighton, I would be in your face, man to man, all over the board, and take your chances with maybe guarding Kalkbrenner. And you might have to, if he gets it in the low post, then you might have to come with some double. But then, of course, that's when the ball reversal. But a lot of teams are really good at that doubling and keeping that ball reversal from leading to a wide open three. So that's kind of what I would do. I would think, again, like you said, I would think Creighton on the defensive ends where you're going to kind of have to hope you can match baskets with them and hope that maybe they have an off night. Their Trey Alexander's really good on defense. He shut down North Dakota State's best player, held him to 2 points or 4 points. And in fact, he was shutting him down so much in the first half that they had a freshman that was knocking him down. So in the halftime, they switched Trey onto him, and he held that guy to 2 points. So he's a tremendous defender. Baylor Sharman at 6'7", guarding a 2 and a 3. It's a lot of length to shoot over. The one weakness, the two weaknesses I would say on the defense, obviously Kalkbrenner is one of the leaders in shots blocked every year, so there's no problem there. Ashworth is a little undersized at 6 feet 6'1". So if you can get a bigger point guard on him, you can get him isolated. We've seen it a couple times in the exhibition. That causes some problems. Now, it's kind of a yin-yang because I watched a ton of Mountain West last year. You mentioned my bracketology. I watched a ton just because it was such a great league and they had 5 teams in for bids. And Ashworth more than held his own defensively in that league. And there were some good guards. Obviously, we think of San Diego State in that league. Colorado State's got a good guard. So they really, I wasn't really that concerned. But I do think that's a little bit of concern. Now, if it's just him, they can flow things into Kalkbrenner and he can erase everything at the rim. The other one is Mason Miller. It's just not enough sample size yet to see how good he is on the defensive end. And that's going to be an issue. If Mason, gets Mason's got good size. He's 6'8", 6'9", and he's athletic, but he's not big. And can he guard a really athletic 6'8", 6'9" guy we Creighton commonly sees in the Big East? One guy I didn't mention, the new player this year, Isaac Trout. He's right out of Grand Island. Nebraska was a top 75 recruit. Creighton was in on him, thought they had him. Virginia came in at the end, swooped him up. I remember a coach that's no longer here saying, that's just a horrible fit for him for what he wants to do. He thinks he's going there to be a 3 or a 4, and he's just going to be a blocker at Virginia, And he quickly figured that out, and so he redshirted last year and immediately hit the portal and came back to Creighton. He can really shoot it. He's 6'10", big guy, totally different skill set than Mason. Very big. He could actually, fill in at the 5 if you had to. But again, he's not that quick. And he's getting better every practice and every game that I've seen. So I think, but the last game, I think McDermott said, out of those 2 guys, we got 16 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 threes. We can't ask for any more than that out of that position. So I think they're happy with that. So far, so good. But that's kind of the thing I would look for Tuesday night is on the defensive end, how those 2 guys are going to guard Iowa's bigs, and then obviously the point guard situation.